I want to get reactions on the Indian position, the opposition alleging that India has missed a moral moment. Ambassador Sinha, India did call out terrorism unequivocally, but also asked for de-escalation. The resolution, which was drafted by Jordan, went through in a landslide win, but did not mention the Hamas terror attack. Do you think India should have voted for it nevertheless?
Well, I think India's vote is broadly correct, because this round of violence has started because of one specific act, a terrorist act of Hamas. It was a brutal act, and had it not happened, this round of violence at least would not have taken place and would not have escalated to this point. So for a resolution not to mention the Hamas attack and to condemn that is, I think, incorrect. One cannot equate the two. Hamas was the terrorist attacker in this. It carried out a brutal attack, and that should be condemned by the General Assembly. I feel that the Brazilian resolution that had been introduced first in the Security Council and which was supported by, among others, the UAE, was a very good resolution because it condemned the terrorist attack. It called for an immediate release of all hostages, which again, this Jordanian resolution does not entirely, I think, clearly state. And it is interesting to note that at least this resolution was introduced by Jordan on behalf of the Arab League, but at least one member of the Arab League, Tunisia, also abstained. So there was some hesitation even among members that are traditionally with Palestine and support Palestine on the manner in which this resolution seemed to gloss over the terrorist attack.
I don't see India's decision to abstain as particularly surprising, Barkha. I think India has become, in many ways, especially after the Ukraine war began, what I have often called an abstentionist power. That means you want a place at the high table, but eventually you find a way to abstain and really not have your vote counted in many ways. You've just mentioned twice, Barkha, that India's problem was that Hamas was not mentioned. I would like to point out to you that in the explanation of vote that you just played out, India does not mention Hamas either. India just says that it condemns the terror attacks in Israel. It condemns or is concerned about the civilian losses from the violence in Gaza. So India has not itself named Hamas in its own statement. The third point I'd like to make is really that it is possible, if India wanted to take a stand, to have voted, if it wanted to, voted for the resolution and put into its explanation of vote all the areas where it thought the resolution was found wanting. After all, India did vote for the Canadian amendment that added the condemnation of the terror attacks in Israel. France, for example, has broken with its Western allies, has broken with the US and UK and other countries, and actually voted for the resolution. In its explanation of vote, the French representative said, we completely are for this resolution because we cannot condone the killing of civilians at any point of time, and there should be no hierarchy in the condemnation of the attacks on civilians, regardless of where they come from. And yet, France goes on to say here, 1, 2, 3 are the things that are missing from this vote. The final point being that if India wanted to make the point that the terror attacks against Israel are essentially, are an integral part of this resolution, well, India does have many choices if it wants to take a leadership position. India could have brought its own resolution or its own amendment into this, which would have perhaps brought others on board. India could have voted like the UK and the US for the resolution, against this resolution, and with Israel. Instead, I think what the government has chosen to do is something that we have seen several governments do, which is to abstain and stay away. I want to remind everyone, though, that in 2018, when there was an Israeli bombardment of Gaza of a similar sort, or perhaps a little less in those days, India did vote for a resolution asking for those attacks to stop.
Well, I think that was the purpose of the abstention. Since the video barbarism of 7th October was not condemned, Hamas was not mentioned, that is why we abstained. So I think, in terms of the finer nuancing, the ambassador and Swasti may be right. But in terms of the broader play of justice, I think our response was just right. And if I may just, say so, uh, apart from the resolution, we must very quickly examine why have we got to the Saudi pass. And here, we must get back to the first principles, which are what? That how do we retain order in the international system? Well, the only way we can do that is that states must retain monopoly over violence and the instruments of force. Now, what is happening? Two things which are different this time. It's not that they've happened in the past, but perhaps they are more aggravated. One is that you are seeing that states are delegating these instruments of force to very powerful proxies. And we know who's doing that. And look at the Hezbollah. It's virtually like
So you mean you mean Iran in the Hezbollah? Yes.
Yeah. And see, it is a second strike instrument with Iran. 150,000 strong rocket arsenal from ranges from 20 kilometers to 700 kilometers, and political entities assuming the mantle of terror. The point is not, if Hamas is a revolutionary body, if it is political, that we have no quarrel with. The issue is, what did it do on 7th October? Their methods. And see, having executed these attacks of terror, let's be fair to the Israelis. What options do the Israelis have when heavily armed Hamas militants have embedded themselves in a non-combatant population? The calls have been going on for 7 to 10 days now that please get to the south of the Wadi line. And when military infra has been deliberately woven into mosques, into hospitals and residential apartments. Now, of course, it must not be vengeance, it must be justice. But in the military calibration of this, the Hamas also must be questioned. Because this is what are they doing? They are getting these civilians to get killed, and of course, then turning the cameras on them and causing all this outrage in the world, which is absolutely right. But the deceit and the sheer abandonment of all kinds of humanity on the part of Hamas and their procs and their mentors or handlers must also be called out.
I think that's a very fair point, but there's also a larger point of the redundancy of the United Nations. Literally, what happened at the UN was Kartha running in parallel with the bombardment of Gaza. Who's listening to the UN anyway? This is a landslide win. Clearly, there is an enfeebling of the United Nations now. Maybe it was always there. How did you see India's choice at the UN?
I think it was pretty well balanced, actually. I agree with what Suhasini is saying. Yeah, we didn't mention the word Hamas, but it's very, very clear our stance that there is zero tolerance for terrorism. And this is something which we've been opting for, we've been talking about for a long time. You can't have two positions on this, saying, oh, it's okay in one side and it's not okay in another. We are saying this is not justifiable under any circumstances. I think the exact wording I have, it says the world should not buy into justification of terror acts. So that is what our position is. Alongside, we've also said that we supported the two-state solution, calling for a sovereign, independent and viable state of Palestine. That is what our position is, and that is what we said. Also, see, just look at the resolution itself. It is entirely, sort of towards one side, towards the Palestinians, talking of you must have access to humanitarian aid, you must have this, that, and the other. And the title of the resolution, it is something it doesn't mention hostages at all. So there's a lot that is wrong with this resolution, which to my mind brings to the fore the possibility, as you said, it was meant to be rejected all along. The phrasing is such that a bunch of countries would have rejected it, or as they did later, because of the sheer tragedy involved, they abstained, including, like we said, including Ukraine.